Happy Sabbath, Shabbat Shalom, and welcome to what I'm going to call the Bible study for the Sabbath, AM to the U.S., PM to the U.K. Now, there's a reason why I'm doing it like that this morning, because those of you who attempted to watch our Bible study, our Friday night Sabbath Eve Bible study, last night, either saw live or later from the archive, which I've got to go pull out of the archive, because as I saw that, I saw some of your comments saying, no sound, no audio. And, you know, I had used the same setup and did a live stream from a hotel room halfway between South Alabama and my home near Birmingham, Alabama, and Bessemer, Alabama, last Sabbath. Many of you saw that was successful from the hotel room. In fact, a lot of you said, well, Steve, we like the way you did that. My sister tuned in, watched, and liked the way we did it too, liked the flowers, liked the hotel room. But last night, right here from my home, downstairs in my kitchen, in front of a television, not in front of a television, in front of a refrigerator, which I had used to hold some magnetic letters that I was using. We got the video out, but no audio, and I apologize for that. We're going to make up for that this morning. And I'm going to do the service possibly in two parts, because today at sunset, beside being the end of the fourth week of our counting 7 weeks, 7 Sabbaths, to then number the day following the seventh Sabbath as day number 50, or 50 count Pentecost as Pentecost. Beside it being the end of the fourth week, or total of 4 times 7, 28 days at sunset tonight, it becomes the 14th of the second month. Now, right now, as you can see on our lower third down here, let me just come in a little tighter so I can point to it. On our lower third, you can see right now it's the 13th day of the second month. And it's the 14th day of May 2022 on the pagan Roman calendar. But on God's sacred calendar, being the 13th day of the second month during the Sabbath, means that at sunset tonight, it becomes the time for the second Passover, which God tells us to do. If you missed the first Passover, God tells us to do a makeup, not put on makeup, but we do a makeup of missing the first Passover, if you missed the first Passover, by observing it tonight, shortly after sunset, on the 14th of the second month, which it will become the 14th of the second month, right after sunset today. If you're watching this live or watching it recorded while it is still the 14th day of May, then at sunset on 14 May, it becomes the 14th of the second month, time for the second Passover. We'll cut services a little bit short today, and you don't keep the second Passover. Let me emphasize this. You do not re-observe the second Passover if you kept it on the 14th of the first month. But if you had a legitimate reason for missing Passover on the 14th of the first month, like you were sick or out of town, weren't baptized yet, and any number of a host of other reasons, and we're going to be very lenient, then you not only may, but you should keep the second Passover if you missed the first. It's the only feast day for which God has a makeup. If you missed the first one of the year, if you missed the first Passover, it's only when he has a second redoing of that feast day, because Passover is so important to God. It's not a holy day, and yet it is the most solemn feast day of the 7 feasts. You know, one of the feasts, the days of unleavened bread, has 2 holy days in it. So that causes things to equalize. For the number of feasts, there are 7, and the number of holy days, there are 7. But that second feast has 2 holy days in it. That makes the holy day count come out 7. And the first feast is not a holy day. Passover is not a holy day. You can work on that day. There's not really a commanded assembly. You can do Passover in your own home, conducted by the head of household. He does not have to be an ordained minister to conduct Passover as the head of the household. But we are going to provide it for you a little bit after sunset in each time zone, beginning with the time zone in Israel, and then in Europe for the United Kingdom, and then for the various time zones in the continental United States and Alaska and Hawaii. So it's going to be a busy day for yours truly, rolling out one after another of live streams of the second Passover. But for those who are here for regular Sabbath this morning, even though we're going to treat this Bible study style, and I'm going to try to make up for what didn't happen during Bible study last night. You saw me pointing at all those numbers we had on my refrigerator, like these numbers here. And where we are, meat in due season. While I've got this slide on the screen, let me just point out that where you see right there the 4:28, I've got a ruler there that says welcome lined up with the number 4, and after the number 4 you see 28. That 4 means at sunset tonight we will have completed 4 of the 7 weeks that we're counting toward Pentecost. And at the end of that 7th week, which are weeks that run the first day through the 7th day of the week, at the end of that 7th Sabbath, we will have completed 7 weeks of 7 first day through 7th day weeks, totaling 49 days. And Leviticus 23, verse 15, tells us that 7 Sabbaths shall be complete. 7 weeks of Sunday through Saturday, first day through Sabbath weeks. 7 of those must be complete. If you just do the arithmetic, 7 times 7 equals what, brethren? Let me give you a moment. A simple arithmetic. You should be able to quickly do 7 times 7. All right. How many of you out there said 50? Well, you need to move to Oregon. All right, listen, everybody in Oregon is not crazy, but there are a lot of people there that are wrongly teaching that we should keep Pentecost on day 51, observe it on a Monday, like we did for 37 years between 1937 and 1973. Now, some of you may be saying, well, wait a minute, Stephen. Mr. Armstrong said we didn't know how to count Pentecost for some 40 years, not 37. Well, that's true, but here's the math on the 40 years. Now, while I tell you this, I'm moving over to punch up Leviticus 23 and verses 15 and 16, because I want to make a reference to something so you can see it on the screen as I talk about it. And let's punch that up right now. Let's see, verse 15. And you shall count unto you from the morrow after the Sabbath, from the day that you brought the sheaf of the wave offering out. So it's the reference in the King James here is saying it's from the wave sheaf day, but it's really from the weekly Sabbath. You shall count to you from the weekly Sabbath, beginning with, is what it should be rendered to say, beginning with the morrow after the Sabbath, beginning with the day that you brought the sheaf of the wave offering. Now, why would I say the King James Version of the Bible is incorrect with that from? Because it's a translation. And those who did the translation failed to do an important thing that is required of translators to do. The rule for transliteration is to follow the grammar of the source language, which the King James translators failed to do, as I said. The source language for this verse says that the wave sheaf day is to be included in the count. So the verbiage in the original text, the original Hebrew text, says include the wave sheaf day in the count. The King James translators were not careful, as they should have been, to follow the transliteration rule that says keep the syntax, the grammar syntax, keep the grammar rules in your target language to follow what were the grammar rules used in the source language. And the grammar rules in the source language said count beginning with the morrow after the Sabbath. The King James translators just said, hey, well, we'll just say from. The word from is not in the original Hebrew text. They just threw from in there, a preposition, to count from that morrow after the Sabbath. Under English grammar rules, which Mr. Armstrong, as the chancellor of 3 college campuses who hired grammar instructors, Mr. LaCour was one of them, a very excellent grammar instructor, they'll tell you that if you count from a day, in English, the grammar rule says you do not include that day in the count. So Mr. Armstrong correctly followed the grammar rule in English in looking at this English translation, the King James Version translation, and other translations. Followed the King James error in failing to consider the transliteration rule that says you've got to keep the grammar syntax from the source language as you put it into the target language, English. From Hebrew to English, they goofed it up. Or you could say they screwed it up. They changed counting beginning with the wave sheaf day to counting from the wave sheaf day. The morrow after the Sabbath is the wave sheaf day. So in the English, they said, don't include it. In the Hebrew, it says, do include it. So that goofed us up for 37 years. What were the other 3 years that we goofed up in not knowing how to count Pentecost? It was that we were counting from the annual Sabbath instead of the correction God gave us in 1937 to count from the weekly Sabbath. And in that case, the word from is correct. We do, in fact, count from the weekly Sabbath, beginning with the next day, the morrow after that Sabbath. We begin with the wave sheaf day as day number 1. That's the way we should have done it. Once we were corrected in 1937 to count from the weekly Sabbath instead of as we had been doing for 3 years with the Philadelphia era and for 7 years on top of that while Mr. and Mrs. Armstrong observed the feast days at home alone together, Loma and Herbert and Loma. So they had 10 years of counting Pentecost from the annual Sabbath, as the Jewish people do. And when they did that way, they included the wave sheaf day in the count as day number 1 when we counted from the annual Sabbath. And we kept day number 50, not day number 51. All right, we're already into the Bible study, and I'm going to save the hymn that we'll sing usually as a wake-up thing and for everybody to be able to participate in the service. I'm going to save that to part 2. Actually, no, I'm not. I'm going to change my mind. So we're live. I can do that, and your prayers can help affect that. One of you may have just prayed and said, "Oh, come on, God, have him sing us, have him lead a hymn for us to sing." So it's in my mind to do that. So let's go to one of the hymns. And let's sing one that relates to a holy day, since we are considering and looking at this feast day of unleavened bread. Greetings to some of my friends there. I've got some special slides I'll be showing during part 2 that relate to some 1 Corinthians 7 church kids, one of whom is saying, "I don't believe God exists." Well, that church kid is in the same position mentally as Mr. Armstrong became for a little while, as people around him began to challenge the existence of God and to teach evolution. And so he started wondering, does God exist? And he sought out, while he was seeking to prove his wife wrong about Sabbath observance being required, while he was trying to prove to her that we don't have to, that all these churches can't be wrong that keep Sunday, that somehow the Bible must be supporting that. While he sought out to prove that the Bible says we should keep Sunday, he also spent time researching on whether God exists or not. And he proved God exists. He wound up proving the Sabbath should be observed, not only the weekly, but he took it a notch further, went over the top and said, honey, Loma, that Colossians 2:16, when you look up the original Greek word, not only means, yes, we must keep the weekly Sabbath, it also underscores and means we must keep the annual Sabbaths as well. They go together. They stand or fall together. And then he wound up proving by following his wife's suggestion that God put in her head after she prayed all night, after Mr. Armstrong had come home with a dissident writing by a Seventh-day Adventist regarding Colossians 2, verses 16 and 17. And he did as his wife suggested. He went back to the library for another day, looked up the original Greek for the words in Colossians 2, 16 and 17, and came back home and said, honey, well, that proves you're right about the weekly Sabbath, but more. It also proves we have to be keeping the annual Sabbath. Nobody else he talked to would do it, even though the leaders of the Sardis-era church at that time acknowledged to Mr. Armstrong, you're right, Mr. Armstrong, but we can't ask our people to do that. We'll lose them. They'll stop paying tithes. They'll stop attending. They'll form their own groups and go somewhere else, and I won't be the leader anymore. And sure enough, that's exactly the attitude they had, although some did take the approach that, well, we can keep them annual Sabbaths if we want to, but we don't have to. Even after the apostasy, some from the then existing Sardis era contacted one of the groups that was holding Feast of Tabernacles here and there and asked, hey, you're coming to an area near us. Can we come fellowship with you and attend that Feast of Tabernacles you're doing with you? And the leader of that group, the first year, he said, yes, you may. Those people from Sardis got there, started spreading the what would you call it? They started spreading the idea that we're here because you can keep these days if you want to, but you don't have to, but we wanted to, even though we don't have to. The leader said, excuse me, but the annual Sabbaths are like the weekly Sabbaths. They are commanded by God, and they're required to be kept. You're to call them a delight, and if you really have your attitude right about it, they are a delight. But when those people wanted to come again the following year, the leader of that group wrote them, and I know him, he's died now, but I know him, and he told me what happened. He wrote them and said, unless your attitude changes to understand that these annual feast days are required, are commanded to be kept by God, then no, you're not welcome here with the spreading the attitude that, well, you can keep these days if you want to, but you don't have to. You know, what if you applied those to the other commandments, like the one about stealing or murder? Well, you don't have to not steal if you don't want to. You can go ahead and steal something. But on the other hand, if you want to not steal something, you can not steal something. But if you change your mind, you know, it's up to you. That's like what Mother Eve did when the devil tempted her with the forbidden fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, the tree of death. Hey, decide for yourself what's right and what's wrong. Instead of letting God tell you, the feast days are commanded to be kept. We'll just decide for ourselves. We'll keep them if we want to, and we won't if we don't. Buzz. Somebody give me a buzzer there. Buzz. Wrong. Let's sing together, brethren, and then we'll go through what I was going to go through with the Bible study last night, which I believe you'll find very, very helpful, the way I summarize it quickly with little numbers that I put on the front of my refrigerator. You check me on that and see if you don't agree that I'm right, that you'll find it simplified and helpful, where you can really get a graphic, quick image in your mind of how these days that we count toward what it says in Leviticus 23, verse 15 and 16 about 7 Sabbaths shall be complete, meaning 49 days, not 50. We'll go through that in detail in a moment. I'll also give you a validation check for how to know which one of 4 dates in the third month Pentecost will occur on, depending on what day of the week Passover that year occurred. A real quick way to know, if you know what day Passover occurs in a given year, you can quick check your count by looking at 4 dates, either the 5th, 6th, 8th, or 10th day of the third month. It's a little trick, a little secret, little thing that I'll share with you here after we sing. Let's all sing together a hymn that's designed for a holy day, from Psalm 15, singing about those who are called to the spring harvest, and hopefully that's you. Smaller, smaller spring harvest, very special calling. And for those called to that, the first resurrection means marriage to Jesus Christ, which those called to the later, greater, colossal fall harvest are not part of that marriage. They come in as children only. But this applies to the spring harvest, because those in the first resurrection will be dwelling on God's holy hill with Christ out of Jerusalem. And let's sing about that. Who, and hopefully that's you, shall dwell on God's holy hill. Everybody, let's sing together on verse 1. Excuse me. Thank you, brethren, for those of you who sang along on that hymn. And we're going to move now quickly into a brief Bible study on counting Pentecost. We're going to start by reviewing the scripture from Leviticus 23, verse 15, the end of this verse, where we want to put some focus and attention. And you shall count unto you, beginning with, is what the original Hebrew text says, in spite of the transliteration error by the King James renderers using the word from, that should not be there. It should be beginning with. And you shall count unto you, beginning with the morrow after the Sabbath, beginning with the day you brought the sheaf of the wave offering. And here's the conclusion of the matter in verse 15. Nothing about 50 days is mentioned in verse 15 at all. It says 7 Shabbats. The word there is not Shabuah for weeks in the original Hebrew text. It is Shabbat. 7 Sabbaths, 7 Sabbath days shall be complete, meaning 7 weeks of Monday, or not Monday, 7 weeks of first day through seventh day, Sunday through Sabbath, Sunday through seventh day Sabbath, days shall be complete. And when you do it that way, you have, there's 7 days in the week, looking at the top of this chart. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days. No, they're not even across the top for a reason. 1, 3, and 5 are the days of the week on which Passover cannot occur, according to God's rules for how the days, the feast days, the holy days need to be worked out for the calendar each year. He's got rules that make it prevent Passover from ever occurring on the first day, third day, or fifth day, ever occurring on a Sunday, Tuesday, or a Thursday. Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday are out. No Passover in the year on those 3 days. Passover can occur, just look down a notch where I've got the numbers lowered, can occur on the second, fourth, sixth, or seventh day of the week. Or in other words, can occur on a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Sabbath. But other than that fact that on which days of the week that Passover can occur, there are 7 days in a week, going back to the creation week. And the first 6 days God worked. That seventh day he rested. And by that rest, he set the seventh day apart, sanctified it, made it holy, a day in which he wants us to remember him as our creator, a day in which he comes to be with us in a very special way on that day. But there's 7 days in the week, and when we're counting those 7 weeks that shall be complete, those 7 weeks of first day through Sabbath weeks, so that by the end of that 7th week, God says, and after 7 Sabbaths, he says 7 Sabbaths shall be complete. And that means how many days, brethren? If 7 weeks of first day of the week through seventh day of the week, Sunday through Sabbath, Sunday through Saturday Sabbath weeks are complete, what's your math going to be? It's 7 times 7, right? 7 days in each week. 7 weeks of those first day through 7 day weeks equals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times 7 equals 49, like we say over there in the far column for that. So 7 Sabbaths shall be complete, 49 days shall be complete. And then what happens? And how does the 50 get involved into this equation? Well, we have to go to the next verse for that. In verse 16, God says, even, you count 7 Sabbaths shall be complete, even unto the morrow after the 7th Sabbath. So we're going to the day after the second Sabbath. The 7th. We're going to the day after the second Sabbath in our count, which you look at our chart here, and what happens is after the 7th Sabbath, let's see, let me get a shot that, keep that in there. After the 7th Sabbath, the morrow after that 7th Sabbath goes back to the first day of the week. The morrow after any Sabbath day is the first day of the week. The morrow after the 7th Sabbath is the first day of the week. We go back to first day of the week, where I've got the little bullet down there for the Pentecost, and it's the total number of days on the far right side. You number that day as day number 50. Let's go back to the scripture screen. And look at that. Even to the morrow after the 7th Sabbath shall you number, and here's the first reference to 50 days, shall you number as day number 50. You shall number that morrow after the 7th Sabbath as number 50 days. And on that day 50, not day 51, not after 50 days are complete, just as the previous verse says, 7 Sabbaths, 7 first day through seventh day weeks shall be complete. That's 7 times 7. 49 days shall be complete, even unto the morrow after that 49th day, after the 7th Sabbath, shall you number as day number 50. That's the day after the 7th Sabbath. After the 49 days, you number that next day as day 50. And keep the holy day offering that day. It was a meat offering, now it's a financial offering. And being a holy day, we do no servile work, and we do a commanded assembly, a holy convocation. Can it get any plainer than that? And our chart over here is laid out to help you understand. There's 7 days in the week. They run first day through the seventh day. The only way that could have run second day through the first day of the week, an odd order for the week, would have been if this scripture here in verse 15 has said 7 Shabuah, 7 weeks shall be complete. Then you could have structured the week any way you wanted to. You could structure it as we did from 1937 to 1973. We structured it from Monday through Sunday instead of from Sunday through Sabbath, or first day through seventh day is the way we should have been structuring the days, just like the week of creation, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, not 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. That's the way we did it. We did 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1 for 37 years until God showed us that this verse was translated improperly, that the translators violated the transliteration rule for keeping the original text, the target language grammar, intact in the source language. So from Hebrew to English, they switched the grammar. They went from a grammar rule that said, include the wave sheaf day as part of your count, begin with the wave sheaf day for your count, to an English grammar rule that said, don't count the first day, count from it, count away from it, get out of the day. So that word preposition from was an improper choice of word by the translators. It's not in the original text. That word from is not in the original text. Language that says count including the wave sheaf day, begin the count with the wave sheaf day is in the original Hebrew text. And the translators should have kept that grammar rule intact as they translated this verse 15. So we know now this verse should be rendered, and you shall count unto you beginning with the day after the Sabbath, the weekly Sabbath, the morrow after the weekly Sabbath. And we know it's weekly Sabbath because it says from the day you brought the sheaf of the wave offering. 7 Sabbaths shall be complete. How do we know from that wording that means the weekly Sabbath, from the day you brought the sheaf of the wave offering? We know that by looking at Joshua 5, chapter 5 and verse 11, that goes back to the time when ancient Israel entered into the promised land. And I've got those scriptures here for you. Okay, if we go to, let's back it up all the way to verse 10. If we go to verse 10 of Joshua chapter 5, we see that the children of Israel encamped in Gilgal. This is after their 40 years in the desert. They encamped in Gilgal and kept the Passover on the 14th day of the month, the first month, at evening, as we're instructed to do, in the plains of Jericho. And so this is just before they enter the promised land the next day. Let's see the next verse for that. We go to verse 11. And what did they do the next day? They did eat of the old corn of the land on the day after the Passover. On the morrow means day. On the morrow after the Passover, they ate the wave sheaf, the unleavened cakes and parched corn in the self-same day. And notice, they did that the day after the Passover. That year, the Passover was on the weekly Sabbath. The day following that was the first day of the week. So those people that are telling you when Passover falls on a weekly Sabbath, those people who are telling you, you've got to wait, you've got to have your weekly Sabbath during the days of unleavened bread. I have a question for those people. Where is that in the Bible? Oh, well, we're listening to our leader over here, Well, what about listening to God's end-time apostle, Herbert Armstrong? Oh, our leader proved him wrong. Well, how did he prove him wrong? Did he prove him wrong from the Bible? No, it just makes sense. You got to have the you got to have the weekly Sabbath be during the days of unleavened bread. Oh, you do? Again, that goes contrary to what we were taught by God's end-time apostle, who said when Passover falls on a weekly Sabbath, that weekly Sabbath is the triggering Sabbath for determining the wave sheaf day the next day. And that's according to the way the ancient Israel did it when they went into the promised land. Right here, this verse, Joshua 5, verse 11. The Passover was on the weekly Sabbath, and the next day they did the wave sheaf. They ate the stuff you eat on the wave sheaf day. And that was the 14th day of the first month that year. Now let's go to verse 12 for a moment. And that's a time when, just a side point, a little extra ditty here, the manna ceased on the morrow after they had eaten of the old corn of the land. So their 40 years was over. On the day, the wave sheaf day, they ate that old corn. God stopped the manna on that wave sheaf day when they entered the promised land. On the first day of the week following Passover that occurred on a weekly Sabbath that year. And the day after the Passover is the 15th. So that year, the wave sheaf day occurred on the first day of unleavened bread. So the holy day, the first holy day, and the wave sheaf day that year were the same day, first day of unleavened bread and wave sheaf day. That only occurs in a year when Passover occurs on the weekly Sabbath. Like you can see here, if Passover occurs on day number 7 up there as the weekly Sabbath, then that weekly Sabbath is counted as 0. It's not counted. In other words, it's not included in the count, but it's the triggering Sabbath for the wave sheaf, which is the next day. Let's see. Let me get a photograph up here that's got the little magnet under day 1 up here during the first week when and whether it be Passover falling on the weekly Sabbath or on day 2, day 4, day 6 of the week. The weekly Sabbath that occurs after Passover, the day following that weekly Sabbath is your wave sheaf day on the first day of the week. The day after any Sabbath is the first day of the week. And the morrow after the weekly Sabbath is when God tells us to observe the wave sheaf day. So I've got that pictured here with the little magnet under column 1 for the first day of the week, lined up with the first week. So the wave sheaf day is the first day of the first week of our 7-week count. And what else do I have here for us on this? Let's see. Now, I've got a ruler right here lined up with week number 4 so that we have today meet in due season. This is where we are today. We are at the end of today's Sabbath. When the sun goes down tonight, in the count toward Pentecost, we will have completed 4 weeks tonight at sunset. And when you multiply 4 times 7, if you count it out on the calendar, you'll see it comes out the same way. We've completed 4 weeks of days 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, first day of the week through the 7th day of the week. We will have completed 4 of those by sunset tonight, so that you will have 4 times those 7 days a week. We'll have completed 28 days of the count toward day 50 Pentecost. So this is where we are. Tonight at sunset, we will have completed 4 weeks, 28 days. We're right in the middle. If we were in the desert at this time, marching around, we would still be eating manna, because we didn't go into the promised land until day number 50 on Pentecost. All right, that's also pictures the time 40 years before that when God gave the law at Mount Sinai. So there's a couple of things being pictured by these 7 weeks that we're counting. God giving the law at the end of those 7 weeks. And what was the other thing I said? Are you paying careful attention? Are you awake? Are you as awake as I'm awake? What was the other thing I said? God gave the law at the end of these 7 weeks on day 50, Pentecost at Mount Sinai, and ancient Israel entered the promised land on the wave sheaf day 40 years later. Now, when they entered the promised land, they began this period of 7 weeks of the Feast of Weeks counting. And so after they entered the promised land on the wave sheaf day, on the first day of that first week is the wave sheaf day of those 7 weeks you count. So then they counted off 7 weeks, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And at the end of that 7th week, on the morrow after, the morrow after any Sabbath day begins at sunset on the Sabbath. After sunset, it becomes the first day of the week. So after that 7th Sabbath, after they had been in the promised land, then day 50, Pentecost came, a Feast of First Fruits. So they started the Feast of First Fruits with the first day of the 7 weeks on the wave sheaf day when they entered the promised land and ate the old corn of the land. And then they did that Feast of Weeks thing for 7 weeks, and then the morrow after the 7th Sabbath, they had big holy day. They killed the lamb and celebrated the Feast of Weeks, the Feast of First Fruits. They celebrated the Feast of Weeks is the 7 weeks before the day of the Feast of First Fruits, which is also known in New Testament language as Pentecost. So they celebrated their entering the promised land for 7 wonderful weeks of feasting, the Feast of Weeks of the First Fruits. And then on day 50, like a jubilee, they had a great celebration of the Feast of First Fruits. They had the Feast of Weeks for 7 weeks, and then on day 50, Feast of First Fruits. Today we call Pentecost, a day on which in the New Testament church in AD 31, God poured out his Holy Spirit and began the New Testament church. Now, after Christ returns, once we are reigning and ruling with Christ and we get to this time in the first part, springtime of a year, right after Passover, the weekly Sabbath after Passover or on Passover, as it was when ancient Israel entered the promised land. So this scripture in Joshua 5 and verse 11, it disproves those who are teaching Pentecost, or let me correct that, those who are teaching that the weekly Sabbath has to be during the days of unleavened bread. Buzz, wrong. The weekly Sabbath can be as it was during the time when ancient Israel entered the promised land. That weekly Sabbath can be on Passover, which technically, even though it adjoins days of unleavened bread and is really kind of like one season, even though it's 2 feast days, Passover and days of unleavened bread, 2 separate feasts, but they adjoin one another. They're one season. They're like the unleavened bread season. You eat unleavened bread during the Passover ceremony. You can still put out your leaven on Passover day, and you got to get it out by sunset, by the evening of the first day of unleavened bread, but you can still be throwing it out on Passover day. But that year when ancient Israel entered the promised land, Joshua 5 shows you was a weekly Sabbath. That Passover was on a weekly Sabbath, and then the next day they did the wave sheaf, ate the old corn of the land. The day following Passover that occurred on the weekly Sabbath, and that weekly Sabbath triggered the wave sheaf day the next day, and that began the 50-day count, not postponed a week later because, we're going to wait till after the last day of unleavened bread that falls during the days of unleavened bread on a weekly Sabbath in a year when Passover occurs on a Sabbath. A lot of people are following leaders that say, wait until the last day of unleavened bread and then the next day keep the wave sheaf day. They're keeping the wave sheaf day a whole week late. Ancient Israel didn't wait a whole week after the Passover occurring on a weekly Sabbath. The very next day, they ate the corn of the land on the morrow after the Passover. That was on a weekly Sabbath, 14th day of the first month that year. Okay, so there's your proof for how to correctly be counting the beginning, the wave sheaf day, when Passover occurs on a Sabbath, a weekly Sabbath. That weekly Sabbath is your triggering Sabbath that I've got numbered up here as day number 0. So you got 7 days in the week. And whether Passover occur on the 2nd, 4th, 6th, or 7th day, whether Passover occur on a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or a Sabbath day, right underneath 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, you see the 2 zeros. The first 0 means that's week. That week in which the weekly Sabbath occurs is considered week 0. And during that week, Passover either began on the 2nd day of the week, and then before that weekly Sabbath, you had 1, 2, beside the Passover, you had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It was 5 days later before the weekly Sabbath occurs, when Passover occurs on 2nd day of the week, on a Monday. If Passover occurs on the 4th day of the week, on a Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, then you've got the 5th, 6th, 7th. You've got the 15th, 16th, 17th. From the 14th, you've got 1, 2, 3 days before the weekly Sabbath occurs, when Passover occurs on a Wednesday. When Passover occurs on the 6th day of the week, a Friday, if you look over the 6th column, when Passover occurs on a Friday, the very next day is the first day of unleavened bread, is the weekly Sabbath. There's just the next day is the weekly Sabbath. And regardless, whether the Passover began 5 days before the weekly Sabbath, 3 days before the weekly Sabbath, a day before the weekly Sabbath, or began that weekly Sabbath itself, it's day number 0. That weekly Sabbath is day 0 in the weekly count. But it tells you the next day begins the count with day 1 as the wave sheaf day. And so I've got a magnet in that first week showing that magnet under day 1 is your wave sheaf day, and then go straight across. You see that first 1 over there means that that first week of counting the first day through the 7th day, you have a total at the very end of that column. 7 days will be complete at the end of that first week. After the second week, 14 days will be complete. After the third week, 21 days will be complete. And where we are right now today, at the end of this Sabbath, at sunset today, 4 weeks will have been complete, equaling 4 times 7, 28 days will have clocked by that we're counting toward Pentecost. Then we'll have 3 more weeks to go, the 5th week, the 6th week, the 7th week, and at the end of that 7th week, at sunset on the 7th week, 49 days will have been complete. And then if we go back to the scripture at Leviticus 23 and verse 15, we see the instruction is, you shall count to you, beginning with the morrow after the Sabbath, beginning with the wave sheaf day, the day that you brought the sheaf of the wave offering, that's the wave sheaf day. 7 Sabbaths shall be complete. 7 Shabbats shall be complete. That is 7 weeks of first day through 7th day weeks, which means in arithmetic, 7 times 7 shall be complete. 49 days, not 50 days, 49 days shall be complete. And then the next verse says, even unto the morrow after the 7th Sabbath shall you number 50 days. The day after the 7th Sabbath you number is day 50. And it's a holy day. Bring a meat offering, bring your financial offering, don't work that day, no servile work that day, and a symbol for a holy convocation. It's a holy day, day 50. Feast of First Fruits, Pentecost, count 50, not count 51. All right, let me give you a secret. It's kind of a secret, and it's also a validation check for the date of Pentecost. In any year, whenever in a year, Passover can fall on one of 4 days. And in a year when Passover occurs, on the second day of the week, go straight down to where you see that 10 at the bottom below the refrigerator line there. Here, let me come out and point to that for you. In that second row, where you see the number 2, indicating that Passover can occur on the second day of the week, on a Monday. Go straight down below the line. Oops, you can't see my desk is in the way, so we're going to come back to this shot right here. Go straight down that column 2, where that means second day of the week. Passover occurred on a Monday, the second day of the week. Straight down, you see the 10. That 10 indicates that Pentecost, in a year when Passover occurs on a Monday, on the second day of the week, Pentecost will always be on the 10th day of the third month. That's the way it counts out. You can figure it out by saying, okay, if Passover, the 14th of the first month, occurred on a Monday, on the second day of the week, then the third day of the week was the 15th day of the first month, or the first day of unleavened bread. And then the fourth day of the week would have been the 16th. The fifth day of the week would have been the 16th. The sixth day would have been the 17th. And the seventh day would have been the 18th of the first month. Let's see, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. I did that wrong. I counted that wrong. If the second day is the 14th, the third day is the 15th, fourth day is the 16th, fifth day is the 17th, sixth day is the 18th, seventh day would be the 19th day of the first month in a year when Passover begins on the second day of the month. And so that means your wave sheaf day would have been the 20th day of the first month. And your counting from the 20th day of the first month always comes out to be, like at the bottom of this chart, the 10th day of the third month is day number 50. So see, you can count it and prefigure this as a stop check. Now what you have to do is take the 10th day of the third month, and we're talking about on God's holy sacred calendar, not a Roman calendar, but you transpose that 10th day of the third month on God's calendar to see what day that comes out to be on the Roman calendar, if you're living by the Roman calendar, to know what to do when you get up in the morning. Now, in a year when Passover occurs on the fourth day of the week, go straight down the column, you'll see Pentecost has to come out on the 8th day of the third month, because just count it out. If the fourth day is the 14th, the fifth day of the week would be the 15th, the sixth day of the week would be the 16th, the seventh day of the week would be the 17th, and then the wave sheaf day, the following day after that weekly Sabbath, would be the 18th day of the first month. And then if you count 50, beginning with that wave sheaf day as day number 18, it comes out to the 8th day of the third month. Every year it comes out that way when Passover occurs on the fourth day of the week. Now, how does that count work out when Passover occurs on the third day of the four that it can occur on in any given year? When Passover occurs on the sixth day of the week, or a Friday, the very next day is the 15th day of the first month, a weekly Sabbath, and your wave sheaf day that year would be the 14th, 15th, 16th. The next day after the weekly Sabbath would be the 16th day of the first month up here that you're beginning your count with. And when you count beginning with the 16th of the first month, it always comes out to be the 6th day of the third month that is on God's sacred calendar, is Pentecost. There's only one other day to figure, and now the count that we did before we go to that, let me just point out that this year, 2022, Passover was on the 6th day of the week, on a Friday. We had the Passover foot washing ceremony, the taking of the bread and the wine on Thursday night, because that Thursday night at sunset is the 6th day of the week, or and after midnight on the Roman calendar becomes Friday. So we had a 6th day of the week, Friday, Passover this year. And you check your calendar, and the 6th day of the third month this year, 2022, is June 5, a Sunday, June 5. But on God's holy sacred calendar, it's the 6th day of the third month. That's the day the Jewish people always keep it on, because this year, when Passover occurs on a Friday, as it does, the very next day, Sabbath, is the 15th of the first month. If Friday, the 6th day of the week, if the 6th day of the week is Passover, the 14th of the first month, the next day after the 6th day of the week, the 7th day of the week, is the 15th day of the first month, and the 15th day of the first month is the first day of unleavened bread, the holy day. And so the holy day, 15th day of the month, occurred this year on a regular weekly Sabbath. And because the weekly Sabbath and the annual Sabbath lined up together this year for the first day of unleavened bread and the weekly Sabbath during the Passover week, that means our count comes out to the same count the Jewish people come out to, because we're both counting beginning with the morrow after a weekly Sabbath, after an annual Sabbath. We're using the same Sabbath day. The weekly Sabbath is also the annual Sabbath this year. So we and the Jewish people come out with Pentecost on the same day, the 6th day of the third month this year, June 5. But only this year. In the other years, when Passover falls on either the 2nd day, 4th day, or 6th day of the week on a Monday, Wednesday, or Friday, the Jewish people, they're counting from the annual Sabbath, that is the day after Monday, Wednesday, or Friday. And that always throws them. Well, I should have said, because we considered Friday where we come out the same. When the Jewish people count from the 2nd day, 4th day, or 7th day of the week, then they come out different from us. What happens if Passover occurs on the 7th day of the week, on Passover itself? That particular day is as ancient Israel did it when they went into the Promised Land. That's the triggering Sabbath for the next day. The next day after any Sabbath is the first day of the week. That's the triggering Sabbath for the next day being the Wave Sheaf Day. And for the Jewish people, they're counting from the annual Sabbath. So the day after Passover, when Passover is on a Sabbath, for the Jewish people, the first day of the week is not the Wave Sheaf Day as we consider it. They wait till Monday to be the Wave Sheaf Day in a year when Passover occurs on the Sabbath, because they're working always from the annual Sabbath. And if the annual Sabbath is the first day of the week, then they make Wave Sheaf Day be the 2nd day of the week, the day after the annual Sabbath. But by counting it, as we understand it, to be from the weekly Sabbath, that makes both the first day of the unleavened bread and the Wave Sheaf Day be the same day in a year when Passover occurs on a Sabbath, on a weekly Sabbath. Okay, does that make sense? Just study the chart. If it doesn't, you'll get it. Mr. Armstrong encourages us to make a spreadsheet on complicated things, and then you can see it fall in place. When Passover occurs on a Sabbath, the next day is the 15th day of the first month, falling on the first day of the week. That makes first day of unleavened bread also be the day that's after the weekly Sabbath that we consider the Wave Sheaf Day. So we got Wave Sheaf and first day of unleavened bread same when you count it correctly from the weekly Sabbath, beginning the count with the Wave Sheaf Day. And whichever day Passover occurs on in any given year, whether it be the 2nd day, 4th day, 6th day, or 7th day, it just moves how many days from Passover the weekly Sabbath occurs. But the Wave Sheaf Day is always the day after, the day following that weekly Sabbath. And it's always the first day of the week. And your count always comes out to Pentecost being 50 days later on the first day of the week. After 7 weeks of first day through 7th day weeks, it has you wind up with the end of the 7th week being the end of a Sabbath day. And the morrow after that Sabbath day, is the first day of the week. And that's where Pentecost falls, always. First day of the week, that's day number 50. And then, as I was telling you, a little validation stop check secret, when Passover is on the 2nd day of the week on a Monday, Pentecost always comes out to be the 10th day of the third month on God's holy sacred calendar. That's always going to be a Sunday. When Passover occurs on the 4th day of the week, a Wednesday, Pentecost always counts out to be the 8th day of the third month. When Passover occurs, moving over there to the 6th column, when Passover occurs on the 6th day of the week, Pentecost always counts out to be the 6th day of the third month. And when Passover occurs on the 7th day of the week, Pentecost, did I say Pentecost earlier? I meant to say Pentecost always counts out. In the case of the 6th day, it counts out to be the 6th of the third month. When Passover occurs on the 7th day of the week, Pentecost always counts out to be the 5th day of the 3rd month. That's just a little secret that, you may need to copy the numbers from this chart. And you check it from year to year. You'll see that the date on the Hebrew calendar in the 3rd month will always either be the 10th, 8th, 6th, or 5th, depending on whether Passover fell on a 2nd day, 4th day, 6th day, or 7th day, on a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Sabbath day of the week. All right, that's just a secret from how the calendar works. And brethren, I always check it against Arthur Spear's complete Hebrew calendar. He takes the days, he's calculated the days out all the way through 2020, not 2023, but he's calculated them all the way out to 100 years, almost 100 years from now. So, let's see, if we're at 2022 and next year's 2023, he's calculated them all the way out to 2100. Yeah, so we're in the 2000 series. He's calculated them out all the way out to the, at least to the 22nd century, and maybe beyond that. It's just the book I have takes it out to the 22nd century, to 2100. If he may have some other works, he's taken it even further. But I can guarantee you, from Christ's words in Matthew 24, speaking to this generation, where he said, "This generation shall not pass until all these things have occurred." One of the things that he talked about was the possibility of the annihilation of all flesh from the earth, which he said would happen, except that he's going to keep a promise to the elect to return just before mankind would have destroyed all human flesh from off the earth. He said, for the elect's sake, that won't happen. I'm coming back to stop it. And that annihilation generation began in August of 1955. Now, how long is a generation? Dictionaries define it as 20 years, 40 years, 50 years, 70 years, or 120 years, or by terminology, by the broadcasting generation, the radio generation, the television generation, the computer generation, the space age generation. And since 1955, we have the annihilation generation. So if you take the maximum number of years for a generation, and there's somewhere in Genesis that God said, I've had it with man, I'm numbering his days to 120. That can be taken one of two ways. That can mean, look, I preached to you guys for 120 years. Your days are at the end of that 120 years of preaching, your days are over. I'm bringing the flood on the earth. I'm going to have a picture of a flood I want to show in part 2 today, because it's got the earth sunk in water. You know, the earth was flooded. And a good proof that God exists is the fact that God unflooded the world that the devil flooded. And then, of course, he unflooded it again after God himself flooded it with 40 days of rain. He let all that water subside. And he had already straightened out the boundaries of the land and all that during the recreation week. But, you know, when you really look at how the earth was reshaped after the devil's flood, his worldwide catastrophic flood, that is a proof that God exists to make order out of chaos. That's a very vivid proof. I'm going to have a slide for you if we can get to part 2 before I have to start live streaming the Passover, second Passover. All right, am I forgetting anything we wanted to mention about this? Okay, again, the Passover can occur on the 2nd, 4th, 6th, 7th day of the week, not on the 1st, 3rd, or 5th day of the week. We're counting 7 weeks to be complete, and the morrow after that 7th Sabbath of first day through seventh day weeks. So after the seventh Sabbath would mean after a week of first day through seventh day, and 7 of those, 49 days, after those 49 days are complete, we number the morrow after that second Sabbath as, right here, number that as number 50. Shall you, until the morrow after the seventh Sabbath, shall you number 50 days. And that's your holy day. You do the meat offering, you do the financial offering, you do the no servile work, you do the assembly and a holy convocation, which can be online during these pandemic days. All right, brethren, that's how it works. And again, we're presently at today, on this Sabbath, when the sun sets today, we will have completed 4 of those 7 weeks that must be complete before we number the next day as day number 50. And that means at the end of this Sabbath, 4 times 7, 28 days of our counting toward Pentecost will be complete. And so tomorrow will be day number 29 as we start the 5th week with 3 weeks to go. 5th week, 6th week, 7th week. Before the morrow after that 7th Sabbath, we number as 50 and observe Pentecost, a holy day, June 5 on the Roman calendar this year. 6th day of the 3rd month this year comes out, transposes on the Roman calendar to the 5th day of June. All right, so that's meat in due season. You can mark your calendar. June 5, beginning the evening of June 4, begins Pentecost. And you have, I think, a little better understanding of what Pentecost means from it being preceded by the Feast of 7 Weeks, the Feast of Weeks, which are feasting of first fruits, eating the first fruits during those 7 weeks, and the manna having stopped on the wave sheaf day at the beginning of those 7 weeks. And following that, after 7 weeks are complete, the next day, the morrow after that, day 50, Pentecost, very special day of the Feast of First Fruits, or Pentecost, the beginning of the New Testament church. And in duality, there will be some kind of, does it not seem there will be some kind of, once Christ returns and we are transformed from flesh to spirit, that New Testament church will have been transformed into spirit from flesh. And I'm just questioning you, giving you some food for thought there to think about, how can this first fruit relate to the time when we are transformed from a physical, fleshly church, which God still calls you holy, righteous brethren, as he even called ancient Israel with reference to such terms, holy and righteous and precious in his sight, a treasure to God, as carnal as they were. And his New Testament church, even more of a treasure. But as I say that, are you not wondering, brethren, as I am, and maybe scratching your head a little bit, how can the present situation, while we are scattered and have allowed ourselves to become so divided by honoring ministers who have created this blankety-blank vanity play Church of God group and that ad infinitum, almost ad infinitum. I mean, you could number them, maybe, but they're almost as numberless as the stars now. They continue to split and resplit as each person decides, I want to be the head of a group. So they form a group. We don't have a group here. I just do a ministry and I just preach to you, preach at you, whatever you want to call it there. Try to be as much of a help as I can, providing anointed cloths for those who need healing. And I have gotten stretched out even on doing that. I've had to buy T-shirts. I cut out the bottom of my T-shirts and anoint them and send them out. You know, brother, try not to overdo that. If you don't really need it, if it's a normal thing, can be healed with food, just take the food. go through the process and heal. But now if you've got something extreme like Nick Teneglia of Fresh Meadows, New York, where you really need brethren to be praying for you and God to be intervening, answering those prayers for a miraculous healing, where he's got a dent and a cut in his forehead and scalp. And so we should not forget Nicky Teneglia. Let me spell that for you. Teneglia, Tenaglia. Teneglia. Tena, Tena, Teneg, yeah, I guess you should say Tenag, neg, Teneg, Lia, Lia, Teneglia, from Fresh Ghettos, New York. No, I'm sorry, that's what Nick told me. Fresh Meadows has become like Fresh Ghettos, the way things are degenerating today. But the city is actually called Fresh Meadows. At one time, a nice place. Nick himself says. But let's remember Nick in prayer. Let's remember Jacob Holst, Dan Holst's son, who is on a trip by himself, and Jacob's son, Dane's son, Jacob, is prone to seizures. So let's pray God help hold those off while Jacob is taking himself a break and a little trip. And ask God to help Jacob be safe and to give comfort and peace of mind to his father Dane. And let's see if we can work something like Dominic. I hope that you and Jacob's father Dane, or Jacob himself, that y'all can eventually finally get together and hook up about that magnesium and how that helped you overcome your seizures. As Dominic himself publicly wrote in the comments section about how magnesium helped turn him from having seizures. Didn't need to take, doctor-style prescribed drugs anymore after he got the right balance of magnesium and what's the word for when you transfer over from drugs to something natural that's like a food that the body needs anyway. Since I've learned about it from you people, I've been buying magnesium and taking it and finding that to be helpful towards sleep and helpful towards general health altogether. And God does talk about that in Psalm 103, verse 5, where God himself through David says, I made good things for your mouth so that your youth can be restored like the eagles. So God himself tells us in his word, you don't always need a miracle intervention. Sometimes you just need to be eating the right things for your body chemistry. And sometimes you need to have that tested. If Jacob were here, I would run him by one of the clinics here in town, which is a natural health clinic. They tie in with the Sprouts health food store, big, beautiful health food store, fresh organic produce and vitamins of all kinds they provide. And a clinic here, test your blood and test your hair and your DNA, can find out your body chemistry type. And they're all over the place. You can probably find one, Jacob, in Nevada, where you are. Now, take a little money. If you come here, while I have a few bucks I could contribute on that, I'll get you over to that clinic, help you get started in that. Dominic will tell you exactly what the magnesium types, there's different types of magnesium that he is taking that helped him overcome seizures by transferring from drugs to magnesium. Magnesium is a mineral, it's a food. And I know God would like to see you try to take care of it in that way. Be less expensive than those prescription drugs. And you may need a doctor's or clinical person, health professional person, to help guide you through that. Or you could wind up, if you just cold turkey withdraw, you could wind up with some real problems. So, and such a thing would, is causing your dad some concern. So on the weekly bulletin, there's phone number and email address for Jacob's father, Dane, for those of you that would like to let Dane know you're praying for his son, which, brother, I want to ask you to do on behalf of of Dane and behalf of Jacob, be praying that his trip, that he be kept protected and safe and can get to a healthcare professional who can help guide him through a transition from drugs to minerals and good food, if that's what Jacob himself is wanting to do. And hopefully Jacob's dad, Dane, will want to see that happen and go along with that, but he also wants to see it be done properly, where Jacob doesn't get out without a professional person's guidance in making this transition. So, brethren, pray for Jacob, please. Pray for Dane. And I do understand that Janet Hunt's son, I don't know his name. Maybe if Jeannie could post that on the weekly bulletin, if she's watching. Jeannie is the sister of Janet Hush's son who has cancer. Her son is not in the church, but Janet Hunt goes back to being a deaconess who served brethren and ministers, opened her home very hospitably for many years. And her daughter Jeannie tends to do the same kind of thing. And it's their son and brother that has that cancer. You could be praying for Mrs. Hunt's son. Janet Hush's son. I'm going to get, I've already been corrected by her daughter on that, so I got it. I hope you'll forgive me for mispronouncing that. It's Hush, Janet Hush's son, like, hush up. Okay, if we have time, I want to come back. I want to stop here and call this a Bible study, and we'll list it for the Bible study section. I'll come back, we'll sing another hymn or two, and will I have time? Yeah, we'll come back in a half hour straight up at noon Central Time, 1 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll come back for a short Sabbath service, sing another hymn or two, and hear from Mr. Armstrong answering the question, why all these different religions today? So if you'd like to come back and join us for that, we'll try to come back for that in a half hour. Okay, brethren? And remember the scripture we had up on the screen from Leviticus 26. Also remember that scripture from Joshua, beginning in verse 10 or 11. 11 is the key verse. On the morrow after the Passover, they kept the wave sheaf in the year the ancient Israel entered the promised land, proving that when Passover is on a weekly Sabbath, that weekly Sabbath is the zero triggering Sabbath for that begins the count with the wave sheaf day that counts to the seventh Sabbath, and the morrow after that seventh Sabbath you number as day number 50 that we call 50 count or Pentecost. All right, so hopefully this was helpful today, and if you come back with us later, I'll try to get that. Oh, you know what? Can I do one thing? Can I go to one video? I had to transfer this video from an iPhone, which came out in a MOV type video format. I had to convert it to an MF4 file, and I have it here. And I step in front and I explain a few things. I've already explained these, but would you want to watch this video with me? Otherwise, you can just say goodbye for now, and we'll come back in a half hour. I'll just play the closing out music in a couple of minutes. But I would like to just check out this video. So I'm going to turn off the volume because we don't need the background refrigerator noise. I didn't say anything. I just stepped in front of the refrigerator, and I'm pointing out here that the first, second, and third day of the week are a no-no. The Passover cannot occur on those days. Passover can occur on the second, fourth, sixth, and seventh day of the week, on a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Sabbath. And that Sabbath that follows the Passover, whenever it starts in the week, is day number 0. And the following day, the day after Sabbath, is always the first day of the week. And when Passover occurs on the second day of the week, it comes out to be the 10th day of the third month. On the fourth day of the week, comes out to be the 8th day of the third month. If Passover on the 6th day of the of the week, it comes out to be the 6th day of the 3rd month for Pentecost. If Passover is on the Sabbath, it comes out to be the weekly Sabbath. All right, I covered that for you already, but I'm trying to keep up with my finger pointing here. If Passover occurs on the 7th day of the week, then that week, that weekly Sabbath that Passover occurs on is the triggering Sabbath. We number it as 0. It doesn't count toward the count, but it is the 0 Sabbath, the target Sabbath, and the day following that is the first day of the week, and on that first day of the week is the Wave Sheaf Day, and that Wave Sheaf Day begins the count for the first week of the first day of the week through the 7th day, so that at the end of that week, 1 week is complete, 7 days are complete. It begins with the Wave Sheaf Day on the first day of the week. That follows after a weekly, not an annual Sabbath, but a weekly Sabbath. And that first week has 7 days in it, first day through the 7th day. Now, what else am I pointing out? That's the first week. Okay, we get that fly out of the way. All right, now, I've got to bang it down on the first day of the week in the first column. After the 7th Sabbath, that's your day number 50, your day of Pentecost. It follows the 7th Sabbath. After 7 Sabbaths are complete, Leviticus 23, verse 15, that means 49 days have been complete, and the morrow after that complete 49 days, that complete 7 Sabbaths, we number as day number 50, and it's the first day of the week. It follows the 7th Sabbath. The day after any Sabbath is always the first day of the week, and that's where Pentecost falls. It falls in the week after the 7 weeks. On the first day of the week after the 7th week, that's day number 50, not day number 51, not 50 plus 1, not 50 days must be complete. That verse 15 of Leviticus 23 very simply, very astutely says that 7 Sabbaths shall be complete. Here it is right there. And then let's go back to that. Is there anything else I have in that video? I think that pretty well covered it. So there is that little video for you. And there's the chapter from 1 Corinthians 7 that applies. And then there's a verse that is key for knowing how to count both the Wave Sheaf Day and Pentecost in a year when Passover occurs on a weekly Sabbath. That is the triggering Sabbath. Okay, brethren, and that is it for our Bible study for this Sabbath day, which, did I give the dates for this day? Let's see. Let me make sure we've had that up there, at least at the end of the program today. Today is the 13th day of the 2nd month. I think I mentioned that, and mentioned that at the end of today, when the sun goes down, it becomes the 14th day of the 2nd month, or in other words, second Passover time. We'll start streaming that in a couple of hours for people in Israel, people in the United Kingdom and Europe, and then later, after sunset tonight, for those in the United States, different time zones, who missed the first Passover. And on the Roman calendar, today is the 14th day of May. So that's where we are on both God's sacred calendar and the pagan Roman calendar. So thanks for joining us for this Part 1 Bible study for May 14 Sabbath. And for those that want to come back on the hour and a half hour from now, we'll do a Part 2 very abbreviated Sabbath service, including God's end-time apostle Herbert Armstrong, with scripture we'll add to the screen to help make it more meaningful, with him covering the subject of why so many religions. Brethren, thank you for joining me for this Bible study this morning, the Sabbath morning of the 13th day of the 2nd month, the 14th day of May 2022. Until later, your host here, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreath. Thanks for joining me. Happy Sabbath. Shabbat Shalom.